Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 8-Bit Monsters Monster Deconstruction for D&D 5th Edition. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the corpse flower found in the Mordenkaisen's Tome of Foes on page 127. The corpse flower is a CR 8 monster worth 3,900 XP, and with that CR 8 in mind, let's take a look at the groupings and how to use this in combat encounters. When looking at Xanathar's Guide for Encounter Building, first we'll look at this as a group monster. As a group monster, we can pit this corpse flower against 6 players at 8th level, 5 players at 9th level, 4 players at 10th level, 3 players at 11th and 12th level, and finally 2 players at 13th to 16th level. And at this point, once you've surpassed, 4 to 2 players, you can start adding in other monsters as well to make this encounter interesting and not just have one corpse flower. Well, yeah, you're right, Troll. At this point, 2 corpse flowers shouldn't be a problem for the group and could be an interesting encounter. Good thinking! Now let's look at using this monster as an epic encounter for your players. For an epic encounter, you can use the corpse flower against 5 players at 5th level, or 4 players at 6th level. Using this against any other amount of players at 3 or lower isn't advised and doesn't come up in the chart. Man, Troll, you are all about the TPK for some reason. Did something happen recently that you want to tell the viewers? Now let's take a look at using this as a solo encounter monster. We can use this as a solo encounter for players at 17th level or higher. And then, unfortunately, we won't be able to use this as a swarm monster because the CR is just too high for that. I don't know about you, viewer, but I'm getting the feeling our troll may have lost a recent encounter with some players. What do you think? Now let's take a look at the TLDW. For our corpse flower, I've found the DCR to be a 5, the OCR to be a 10, the FCR to be an 8, and luckily the printed value is also an 8. So that's good news. We've found the printed value for our corpse flower, but if you're curious as to how these numbers came around, let's move on into the skills and traits and take a closer look at our corpse flower. Due to the CR level of our corpse flower, the proficiency bonus for this monster is going to be a +3. And with that +3 bonus, unfortunately, it doesn't have any skills or traits that are going to benefit from this +3 bonus, but we can look at a few other things. Firstly, we can look at the condition immunities, and it is immune to being blinded and deafened, which can be important for its senses, but beyond that, there's really no other reason to really worry about this. Now that we have the skills section worked out, let's move into the traits and take a look at what this corpse flower has. Troll, it sounded better in my head. I thought it would be good to at least let the viewer know about the conditions, but I guess it was a bit of a waste then. Oh well, better luck next time. The first trait it has is corpses. And the corpse flower has a certain number of corpses within its body. On average, this corpse will have usually about 6 zombified bodies inside of it to do one of 2 things with. The one thing it can do with the corpses is regen, and when it regens, it will get a total of 11 hit points back on average from 2d10 dice. The other thing it can do with the corpses is animate them and turn them into zombies, which would act on their own accord. The interesting thing is that the zombies will also get the Stench of Death trait, which we will take a look at a little later on. But something that should be noted for the zombie, which also won't really change the zombie CR rating either. One thing to note about the consuming of the corpses is that it acts similar to a regen, and this will allow bonus effective hit points. And because it'll have a minimum of 4 bodies, we can actually count this as a bonus effective hit points and total that into the DCR. So if the corpse flower decides to use 1 corpse per turn after taking damage, it can in effect get plus 11 hit points every turn regenning up to a total of 9 total corpses, unless it kills some players or NPCs in play and uses those bodies as well as food to regen. So the corpse flower will have, at maximum, 9 rounds of healing before it can be defeated. So because of this, we will add in a total of 33 effective hit points when we get to the DCR section. The next trait it has is Spider Climb. And as we may have seen before in the past, Spider Climb actually gives no effect to the corpse flower besides allowing it to climb on crazy surfaces. And as it goes, this is a large plant. It'd be pretty gnarly to see this thing climbing up a huge tree or the side of a mountain or in a cave or something where it just is completely unexpected. Actually, that would be a pretty fun spot to have a corpse flower up in the corners of some cave close to the entrance where it can still get some light and totally surprise the players possibly. The next and last trait that the corpse flower has is Stench of Death. Now, I'm going to give this one a no effect, and that's because the players within 5 to 10 feet of this monster have to make a constitution check. And if they fail, then they are paralyzed for 1 round. And then they have to make this check consistently on every turn until either they're 1, defeated, or 2, they become immune to the effects. And because of that ability to become immune to the Stench of Death, this is actually an unreliable trait, and why I think it gives it no effect to the CR value once everything's calculated. The interesting thing too is that the consuming section of the corpses is more reliable than the Stench of Death, and this does actually work out in the mathematics when we look at the DCR later on. Now that the skills and traits are finished, let's move into the DCR. Now, our corpse flower has an actual hit point value of 127, and this comes from 15 D10 plus 45, and this would rate the corpse flower at a DCR 4. But because of the consume ability on the corpses and giving it an effective plus 33 hit point bonus, this will bump the corpse flower up into an effective hit point range of 160, which would then equal a DCR of 6. With the DCR range set, we'll look at the actual AC of 12, and because nothing is affecting our corpse flower's armor class, this will also be the effective AC of 12. And with those values set, let's take a look at the chart and see what the expected AC rating for DCR 6 is. And looking at that chart, we'll find that the expected AC is a 15. Comparing the expected to the effective AC, we'll see that this is -3 under the expected rating and results in a -1 shift from a DCR 6 to 5. Great. We have our DCR 5 set for the corpse flower. Let's shift into the OCR. Now in the OCR, our corpse flower has a multi-attack, and that comes from 3 tentacle attacks. The tentacles themselves have 9 average damage coming from 2d6 plus 2 bludgeoning damage. This is also coupled with a 14 poison damage coming from 4d6. Now, because of the difference between the bludgeoning and the poison damage, because the poison is reliant on a difficulty check, we're actually going to look at the DC value later on instead of the actual attack bonus coming from the tentacles. And because the corpse flower can swing 3 different tentacles during combat, we'll have a total average damage of 69, which rates us at an OCR of 11. Some interesting things to also take note here, which I will be using in calculations later, is if a player has a poison resistance, then this will drop the average damage down to 48 and rating an OCR of 7. And if someone that is attacking the corpse flower has a poison immunity, this will then net the corpse flower an average damage of 27 and rating it at an OCR of 4. Those are some significant drops from an OCR of 11 down to 4, depending on if there's poison resistance or poison immunity that the corpse flower is attacking something with. Now, as I suggested before, we're not going to be looking at the attack bonus this time because there's more damage coming from the poison and the resistances of that, and we'll be shifting to the difficulty check of the corpse flower's poison attack in the tentacles. So our corpse flower has an actual DC of 14, and this comes from the base 8 plus the proficiency bonus of 3, and a constitution bonus of 3 as well, which nets us an effective DC rating of 14. Now looking at our chart, we'll take a look at the OCR of 11 area and see that it has an expected DC of 17. When we compare that to the effective DC of 14, this will also be a -3 under the expected rating and result in a -1 shift from an OCR of 11 to 10. Well, we have the OCR worked out. Let's jump into the FCR and get those final ratings figured out. So for our FCR, we're going to first take a look at the multi-attack. And the multi-attack is going to have a DCR of 5 plus an OCR of 10, which equals 15, and when we average that out, we'll have 7.5. And from there, we just simply round up to the closest CR value, and that will be a CR 8, which is perfect. We have the printed value of the corpse flower. Now, let's take a look at what happens when there's poison resistances and poison immunity somehow. For poison resistance, the DCR will again be a 5, plus an OCR of 7, which equals 12, and when we average that out, we'll have a CR of 6. And finally, with the poison immunities, once again, there will be a DCR of 5, plus the OCR of 4, which equals a 9, and average that out, we'll have 4.5, and rounding up to a CR of 5. So there's a considerable drop in CR values if the players fight this corpse flower smartly, or do their research. I'll speak about this a little more in the notes section, which we'll take a look at now. For our first note, if the players are smart about fighting this corpse flower and they know about it ahead of time, they can come prepared with poison resistances or poison immunities somehow, and really drop the difficulty of this corpse flower from that CR 8 we found all the way down to a CR 5, which makes it so much easier to fight. Second note is the corpse flower should consume corpses rather than animating zombies for longevity. Now, if the corpse flower isn't taking any damage, then sure, go ahead and pop one of those corpses out to turn it into a zombie and really mess with the players. But if the corpse flower is actually taking damage, then it's better for the corpse flower to consume those zombies rather than reanimate them. And finally, the last note is my favorite section of what's the absolute maximum hit points you could give this corpse flower without adjusting its CR value. And unfortunately, the corpse flower can't go any higher than 16 D10, because this would then push the corpse flower into a DCR of 7+, raising the FCR to something of a 9+, really skewing the printed CR. Lastly, let's look at the CR review. So with the corpse flower, is it balanced? Yes, the DCR plus the OCR rounded up does give the printed value, which is great. Now looking at the DCR of a 5, we'll see that this is definitely less than the printed value of an 8, which is 3 steps under the printed value. The hit points being a DCR of 6 are 3 steps below it, and the AC of a 12 is also 3 steps below the expected 15 rating. So this is just going to result in a much easier plant monster to kill in the long run. Now of an OCR of 10, which is greater than the printed CR value of an 8, this is 2 steps over, and the DPR is an OCR of 11, which is 3 steps higher than the printed value. Now, the DC rating of 14 is 3 steps below the expected DC rating of 17, which means the poison may more than likely be resisted, but since it works off of Constitution, not many classes have proficiency against Constitution saves, besides a couple. The likelihood of a player saving against a Constitution difficulty check isn't that great, but still possible considering it's much lower than expected. Thank you for joining me as we deconstructed the corpse flower from D&D 5th edition. Join us again next week as we deconstruct another monster from D&D 5th edition and break it down into its barest parts to see what is going on with these monsters. If you've been enjoying these videos, I would really appreciate it if you would share these videos with your friends, your D&D groups. Shoot, if you play Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu or any other TTRPG, consider sharing it with them. I would really appreciate it, and it could help the channel grow. Until next time, when we deconstruct another monster from D&D 5th edition, take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.